souls tend to evolve, and my mother was the first one to tell me from the other side that there are neighborhoods in the spirit world of thought. Like-minded people tend to hang out in the same neighborhood.
Just like here.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And yet they can grow and evolve and choose to move on up to the east side if they want to. Like the Jeffersons.
It's funny, segregation is such a thing here in our world and all that, but even here we tend to gravitate towards those who look the same, think the same.
Right.
You know, all the Republicans are over here, all the Democrats are over there.
Yeah.
You know, and they meet in the middle and fight. I think that's just human nature.
Yeah, and a lot of people have this concept that once we do pass on, we are automatically totally enlightened. And that never made complete sense to me.
I don't know about that.
Because
otherwise we wouldn't have to be here to learn anything.
Well, that's right. And I happen to be a big believer in reincarnation, too. I don't try and force anybody else to believe that. It just makes sense to me. It always has, since I was quite small. And certainly wasn't anything that was ever talked about in my house, trust me, on that one. But it just was something I came to that conclusion on my own, that this life is too short. I don't care if you live to be 22 or 102. There's still so much to learn. This is such an amazingly multidimensional universe.
If we do keep coming back and forth, I'm surprised that the grand plan didn't make us live to be 750 and get it all done at once.
Well, Methuselah did that, but you know.
Yeah, but it didn't catch on. You know, and whatever his secret was, I'd like to know.
Yeah,
you know, that and DeSoto looking for the fountain of youth.
Right.
All right, you've also done a lot of work, like trying to locate missing people, pets, etc. Well, you say you got objects on here. Now that's interesting. Let's start with that one first. When someone comes to you and says, "I've lost my car keys,"
yeah,
you left them on the bureau,
right? Or many times with objects, it tends to be jewelry. But I have had people actually solicit my help to try and help find a will that they.
You mean a physical will? Oh, okay.
Yeah, last will and testament that somebody they are sure left, but somehow or other is not present, or somebody else got to it, you know, and they have this suspicion. So I've been successful in helping with some of those kinds of things. There was a gentleman in the first case study in the book, toward the beginning of the book, I've included some of the case studies of readings I've done, and a gentleman named Jim Mills, who was just an amazing communicator. He was a television reporter. He was on an evening travelogue type of show, and very popular, very loving spirit. And his sister and brother came to me back in 1995, I believe it was, and said that Jim had been missing for a couple of years, and could I possibly tune in to what might have happened to him, because since they had never found a trace of him, they thought maybe he had had amnesia and gone on and started a new life or whatever. And he had disappeared. The last time he was seen was climbing a mountain, which he was a very outdoorsy guy.
Just kept going.
Yeah, and left his brother and Jim's son both at the base camp. It was kind of a rainy afternoon when he started up. And anyway, the first thing that I heard in my head, I'm very much oriented towards clairaudience, so I hear things in my head. I also do see visions, which is clairvoyance, and clairsentience, I feel things, but primarily with me is the clairaudience. And he said, well, you have to tell my family that my physical body is dead. And that's never an easy thing to say to someone. Sure. And I always kind of qualify it by saying there's a big part of me that really hopes I'm wrong. You know, because psychics are not infallible. I have never believed that anyone is. And for years, search and rescue, this was in the Colorado mountains, they tried to locate him doing flybys in helicopters, but because that was the most treacherous face of the mountain from which he fell, you know, and they didn't want to lose people looking for him. And then about in 2005, 10 years from the first time that I saw Sherry and Dave, his siblings, she called me and she said, you're not going to believe this, there were two guys that were not bungee jumping, but rappelling. They certainly wouldn't have bungee jumped off this mountain, rappelling off the mountain, and when they came in to touch their feet against the side of the mountain, one of them looked into it for miles and said, oh my God, there's clothes in here, I think there's somebody in here. And they investigated further and found his backpack with all of his ID. And he had been, basically, his head and top torso had been preserved under the snow. And then when the police did go up there and airlifted his body down and searched the side of the mountain, they found his credit cards had fallen out for 10 years, had just been there. That's how undeveloped that mountainside was.
And the orange bush?
The orange bush, I don't think was in bloom when they found it, but that's okay.
Okay.
You know, I'm just glad his family got closure and was able to move on, because he had several children too, and it was something I know that he wanted for their sake, was to not wonder if he was still somewhere and why he wasn't getting in touch with them. Of course.
You know, for as long, you know.
Yeah. So when I work with anybody who's had a murder victim or missing persons type of thing, that's my whole motivation, is to try and help the family come to terms and just find some peace.
Good. All right, we touched on this a little bit before with Johnny, but now what kind of readings that you've done in the past or currently really stand out in your mind? Tell us about some of the freakiest things. I mean, that's what sells. That's what sells tickets.
Oh, well.
You know, the manifestations, the white woman floating.
We were talking about electrical things before we actually started taping today, right? And I had a young man named Michael who came through very strongly for his fiancée when she came to me for a reading. And he was just very boisterous, very effusive, and was having a lot of fun, and his fiancée was just sitting there with her eyes open. She hadn't even told me that she wanted to meet him or what his name was, but he had burst right through. And then for a couple of weeks, even after she was gone, he still hung around me because he knew I could hear him and feel his presence. And
that 3 days before this happened, I had spoken to her, and she told me that my friend was going to try to reach me via making the lights flicker. She mentioned she'd never been to my house. She wasn't even in the same state. She mentioned the lamp, what the lamp looked like, where it sat, all of which was true, and that in a few days that they were going to try to, or she was going to try to make this, or not she, Cheryl, but my friend was going to try to make this lamp flicker to let me know everything was okay. And that was on a Sunday evening. No, Sunday morning. Sunday evening, stairs and broke my foot.
She didn't tell you about that.
No, thanks. And I was kind of housebound up 36 steps, you know, so my mother came over to help me, you know, function and get up and down these steps. And we're sitting there watching television one night, and it was so imperceptible at first. The light starts flickering, the same one I was told about, till finally it is flashing on and off like a disco. So much so that the bulb blew and there was smoke. So we went, of course, and threw the breaker switch. I mean, letting us know you're here is one thing, but burning the house down is not quite acceptable.
So your friend was very dynamic, though.
Yes, she was.
Was a performer, much like Jim.
Performer,
she was used to being on camera and having a lot of attention.
Right,
yeah.
and the lighting must be right.
Yeah,
and this is what it was.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was probably the most phenomenal experience, other than some of the other things that you could vocally tell me that existed. But
well, that kind, and I truly believe that the movie Ghost was channeled in a large part, because where the crazy guy on the subway was showing Patrick Swayze's character how to move the penny and all of that with his intention, I really do believe that's pretty much the way it is.
I think we all have it figured out. I just don't think we're supposed to exactly know. Otherwise, if heaven and paradise were proved, every time we got a hangnail, we'd get, hell with this, I'm out of here.
Yeah,
you know,
so nice over there.
Then we don't learn whatever it is, or whatever our reason for being here would be intercepted. So that's, I know we're not probably supposed to know, but it sure is fun delving into it and trying to find out as much as we can.
Yes.
Because it also makes living here a lot more easier. If I know that friends and family are over there waiting, you know, not just believe, but if I know, it makes living here so much easier.
Yeah.
And dealing with the loss so much easier. Beyond so much easier.
Yeah, well, another thing John did too, different than electricity.
John, your brother?
Johnny, my brother, yeah. I was going to a conference where I was, before the book was in print, where I was going to pitch it and try to get investors interested in it. And things were just falling into place.